There's been a lot of talk this past year about rising interest rates and the effects that has on mortgage payments and home affordability. And that's completely valid. Home values have not decreased, not notably, and interest rates have nearly tripled. So that significantly increases the monthly mortgage payments for the same loan amount. So, since we qualify for a loan based on monthly payments, not on the price of the house, that means if we qualify for a loan of $500,000 at 3% interest, the amount of the loan decreases to $315,000 at 7% interest because the monthly payments are the same. This changes what you can afford with a new loan. What I have a huge problem with is large platforms like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times publishing articles that essentially conclude that home ownership is now unaffordable at current interest rates. And sometimes they imply that we may as well rent forever. This is flat out wrong. They are focused on the increased cost of the new loans and not comparing the cost of renting to the cost of home ownership. Home ownership is the single best way for the vast majority of Americans to gain financial security and freedom and wealth. And while the analysis of renting versus buying is a critical one to understand, there are a lot of people who do a great job of explaining it. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes to one of my favorites. So please watch that. What we're going to do in this video is talk about 3 ways you can buy a home at 2021 rates. So let's look at 3 ways you can buy a home with a really low interest rate loan. Now, there are 3 different methods they're completely different from each other and have completely different pros and cons. But the terms for them are often used interchangeably, so it can be very confusing. So let's just define them, and then I'm going to dive a little more deeply into just one of them. The first, let's call subject to loan. So this is a purchase in which there is a loan in place. The seller keeps that loan, and the buyer pays the seller an agreed on price. And then the seller, well, in the case of a wraparound mortgage is what they term it. The buyer pays the seller pays his mortgage. So the mortgage stays in place, all the terms of the loan stay in place just as they were. It's just a new person takes title. Now, this has a lot of potential problems, which I'm sure you can anticipate many of them, like you make the payment, does the seller make the payment to the mortgage company? You don't know that that's going to be the case. So that opens you up to some risk. Almost all loans have a due on sale clause in them. So if the lender finds out that you're doing this, that you've changed title, that you've sold the property, and this loan is still tied to it, they can claim it due and everything. So it's useful in some situations, but I don't deal with them much, and there are a lot of pros and cons to them, kind of more cons than pros. So that's a sub to or a subject to loan. The second option is seller financing. Now, a lot of people use seller financing for like all the different types, and seller financing really only means the seller is financing the property, not a lender, not a mortgage company, nobody else but the seller. So that means there cannot be any other loans on the property. The seller has to be the sole owner of the property. So they are providing you with the loan. And you may think, well, how common is that? Actually, in Colorado Springs, it's quite common. There are a lot of properties here that are owned outright. So, and in many cases, they're going to be people who've had the property for 30 years or more. So the loan is paid off and it's owned free and clear. And in many cases, they're downsizing or moving into a retirement community or moving out of state to retire in warmer climes. So in many cases, they're very happy with 10 or 20% down payment and then monthly income on the mortgage, and it works out very nicely. So that's a very clean way to do it, and there's a lot more of it available than you may anticipate. And the third option is assuming a loan. And this is what I want to bring your attention to and focus on for the purposes of this video. So, an assumption is one in which the buyer purchases the property, it changes to his name, he takes ownership, but the loan that is in place on the house that the seller opened in order to purchase the house stays in place, and the new owner assumes that loan, all the terms and everything of it. It becomes the buyer's new loan for the property, but it's not a new loan, it's the existing loan. And this is where it gets really interesting. So let's hop into our local MLS, Pikes Peak Association of Realtors. Let's jump in here. So let's see. Currently, I'm going to go down and just look up assumable loans. Okay, there are currently 92 matches. Now, this does not mean this is all of the assumable loans available. This is just the number that agents have discussed with their sellers as, yes, they're willing to offer this a loan as assumable, and the agents are savvy enough to have discussed that and put it in the MLS with those terms that there is an assumable loan on the property. Okay, let's click over to results. And we can see here we have, let me take a look at all of them. We start at $240,000 for a townhome on the south end of town, and up to, well, look at that, 1.1 million. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's click over to the map. Let's say we're looking for a property on the north end of town. Let's see here. Let's see, we've got an expensive one on the east side. Monument. Let's just click on one of these. Okay, this looks like a townhome up in Monument, just west of the interstate. Let's go over to that listing. So this is a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, 2-car garage, 1,700 square foot townhome. Let's go look at the mortgage information. So the loan balance is $423,000. The monthly payment is $1,951, and the interest rate is 2.49. Let's take a look at what that looks, how that would compare with a new loan if you were purchasing that house. Or let's look at it this way. Let's say for a 1961, I think, was the monthly payment on that. If we were getting a new loan at, the current interest rate is around, with a credit, we're on a 30-year fixed, we're at about 6.8. Let's see if we needed a monthly mortgage of 1960, how much house we could afford at the current interest rate. I'm going to guess it'd probably be around 3. Wow, that's really close. Okay. So for that monthly payment, if you were to get a new loan at the current interest rate, you could afford a $300,000 loan would give you that same payment. Whereas the house we're comparing to is over $123,000 more for the same payment. Let's flip back over and look at a higher end home. Yes. Okay, let's scroll down here and see what we can find in higher end house up north. Oh, Sanctuary Point is a lovely area. Thundercat Way. This is a beautiful area in School District 38 up in the Monument area. This should be a beautiful house. So this is 5 bedrooms, 6 bath, 3-car garage, 5,126 square feet. This is a gorgeous home. Large lot. I didn't look at when it was built. This has got to be within the last decade. Beautiful home. And let's take a look at what this existing loan looks like. So the interest rate is a bit higher at 4.62, still really good. The loan balance, see, this is beautiful because the loan balance is really close to the purchase price. So assuming this loan, you have very little difference to pay for with a monthly payment of 6870. So on a $1.2 million house, that's great. List price is currently 1.3, but we know this is what they owe. So you cover agents' fees and closing costs, and you're pretty close there. So the loan amount is covering the bulk of the purchase price. So you have a very small difference between the loan amount and the value of the home. So that's pretty exciting. Just for the fun of it, let's take a look at what that same loan amount at a current interest rate would come out as a monthly payment. I didn't write it down though. It was 1.138, I think. I gotta work on my zeros here. 1.138. So 4, 5, 6, that's 1,600, a little under 1,600 a month difference in your monthly payment. I mean, that is exciting, isn't it? Okay, let's see what else we can find here. Just kind of see what kind of properties. Townhomes, houses. Oh, this is in Glen Eagle. I think I know this. Yeah, I know this one. I reckon it's purple. I know I've seen it before. I was not aware. Oh yeah, this is a pretty one. So don't remember the age of this. This is a pretty house. This is in Flying Horse. Fairly reasonable sized house. Not a very big sized lot, but very, very low maintenance. These are very turnkey properties in here. And Flying Horse is a neat community in a great area on the north end of the Springs. Very reasonable HOA dues, quite a reasonable HOA itself. But let's look at what the terms of the loan are because that's what we're in here for. Okay, so the loan balance is not as high as the other one, but the interest rate is incredibly good at 2.25. So even at 860, the monthly payments, this is principal and interest, is 4576. Now they started at 1.3, they've dropped it 175,000. So current list price is 1.125. So you have a bit of a difference between the purchase price and the value of the home. And this still might be, I knew at 1.3 when it went up, it was overpriced. This is getting close to market value now, maybe a little bit less. But so you have a little bit more of a difference. There are some issues with getting seconds, although it is possible in some cases. It's going to depend a lot on who's servicing the loan. So your lender, it's good to know who the lender is and how competent they are in servicing assumptions. So let's go ahead and review the conditions for assuming a mortgage. First of all, it needs to be your primary residence. I'm actually not 100% of the time. It is becoming possible for it to be an investment home or a second home, but most of the time, it needs to be your primary residence. Closing these loans takes longer. Typically, a short one would be about 60 days. Longer is up to 120. So you can You can expect an average to be somewhere in between those two. But while the assumption process may take a bit longer than a conventional new loan, the costs associated are usually quite a bit lower because you don't need to get a new appraisal, and title insurance costs are usually substantially less. Usually, the major stumbling block in assumptions is getting cooperation from the lender. So they're not highly motivated to perform assumptions. They make no money on them essentially, and they would far prefer to close out this 2.25% loan that's still got 29 or 28 years left on it and put out a brand new one at 7% and 30 years left on it, right? So, but they have to, by law, they have to accommodate it. So I've found the best way to deal with that is to hire a independent third party to help organize the whole thing and be the go between your agent and you and the title company and the servicer of the mortgage. And there are some great ones in town, and they charge very little, and it just makes it so much more seamless because they can set the entire thing up cleanly. They know when to nudge them. They have the file prepared accurately, so you're not having these huge delays of, submitting the file. The underwriter finally gets to it. They see something wrong with it. They send it back, and then you're back at the bottom of the pile as they work their way down to it again. So there are ways around it. So how many of these are available? As we saw here, there are 91 or 92 currently on the MLS, but those are just the ones that are listed as being assumable. That doesn't mean that's all that's available. Every government-backed loan, so every VA, FHA, or USDA loan is, by the terms of the loan, an assumable loan. So have a good agent who knows how to find these. Go seek them out. The market has shifted enough in the buyer's favor that sellers need to accommodate assumptions, which to them is just a little bit longer closing time. And so in our current market, that makes perfect sense, certainly to the buyers, and it does now to the sellers too. An assumption can be the difference between getting something that's a real compromise to you and something that puts you way ahead of the game and you are absolutely delighted with. So take heart. There are a lot of great houses on the market at well under 5%. Go find them.